Hi everyone, and welcome to the Bank of England's Money Matters series, where we'll be hosting different finance influencers to discuss key themes to do with money. For more information on this series, including other topics that we have covered in past sessions and discussions, which include savings and budgeting, please do check out the Bank of England's social media channels, where you will be able to find that and so much more. But today I'm joined by James Beckett, otherwise known as the Money Stocker. James, would you like to introduce yourself?
Absolutely, yeah. I'm James Beckett. I run the website moneystocker.com, and I'm on Instagram as the Money Stocker, on TikTok as Money Stocker, and I provide financial education to people in the UK.
Well, that's fantastic. And today, James and I will be talking about investing. So previous themes that we've discussed, as I mentioned at the top, were savings and budgeting, but investing is also a really key part of discussing money matters. And so I want to hear more from you, James. In your kind of line of work and your experience, what are some key challenges that you come across when it's to do with investing?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we should start by saying that this isn't financial advice, and obviously with investing it does carry risk, and that is probably one of the biggest challenges, is that in the UK, a lot of us are risk averse. So people just don't want to lose money, and that's a normal feeling to have.
Before moving on to the kind of dilemma, and whenever we do these sorts of discussions, there's always like a dilemma where an individual has, it could be to do with investing or budgeting or whatever, but they're facing a certain scenario, they have a few different options and they don't know what to do.
Yeah.
And you've had some really interesting responses, and I've seen that on the kind of social media channels. But before we get into that, what do you think are some of the key considerations that young people especially should be making when they start embarking on this journey of investing, or even if they're seasoned investors by the age of 19 or 20? What are the key sort of considerations that they should think about?
Well, I'd say you need to have your foundations in place first. So a big one, for example, is having an emergency fund. You want to make sure that you've got cash savings of 3 to 6 months stored in cash, so that if you have an emergency, your boiler breaks or the car breaks down, you can pay for it without dipping into your investments. You want to make sure you've got no high interest debt, for example, and you just want to make sure you're in a strong financial position. And that's when you can start researching. So you want to have everything in order, and then you can start looking at, okay, what are the type of accounts I should be using to grow my wealth? Should I be using a cash ISA for short-term savings, a stocks and shares ISA for long-term investing? Should I be using a lifetime ISA to save for a home, for example? Have I got my pension in order? There's lots of things that you want to consider in terms of the accounts. And then the next level above that is like, well, what should I be investing in? And that's thinking about things like, what are my goals? Do I want to retire early at 45? It could be possible if you start early. Do I want to have a yacht? It could be anything, but you need to understand what those goals are and how long you have to get there, because that will inform your investing decisions. So there's a lot that you need to think about in terms of the levels before you're ready to actually open an account and then start researching the investment that meets those goals.
So you're suggesting it has to be step by step. There's no way you could sort of build the ship or the car and drive it at the same time. It has to be methodical. Is that right?
That's the right way to do it, I think. You could, for example, just dive right in with a mock investment account with no money and just have a play around. Like, that is an option. Or just with an amount of money that you're willing to lose. Because if you don't know what you're doing, there is a chance that you can lose money. So you can just dive in, but if we were going to do this properly and we were going to give people the right steps, it is a ladder that you should climb.
That's really interesting. What is the one thing that people don't know about investing? The kind of, when you're talking to people, they're always a bit surprised to learn something about investing that, it's like a fun fact or...
Yeah. Well, there's a lot, but
oh, right.
I think I would probably start with compound returns. I think that concept is just still not quite understood by enough people, because it's the reason you can start investing from £20 a month, as we'll talk about in a second, and potentially grow your wealth significantly over time. It doesn't sound like a lot, £20, but with compounding returns, it can grow an enormous amount. And that is essentially where your returns start earning their own returns. So if you earn a 10% return on £20, next year, the returns on that original amount plus the interest on that amount will earn its own returns, and that starts to snowball over time. It's quite a difficult concept to understand, but if you use something like an investment return calculator, you can just Google it, you'll find one online, investment return calculator, plug in the numbers, and change the amount and the percentage over time, you'll see this graph that goes like this. It's like an upward shape, and that's because your investment returns are owning your own returns. What people will find when they get to the end of their investing journey, whether that's 45, 65, whenever they end their journey, is that they won't have actually contributed that much of their own money. All of the returns is coming, or the vast majority is coming from those investment returns. So if you can understand compounding returns, you'll be sold on the idea of investing, because it doesn't have to be that much to grow a significant amount.
And does that also apply in cases where an asset or something you invest in doesn't increase in value? Because compounding interest, I'm assuming it relies on kind of a positive return.
Right.
You're seeing a profit, let's say.
Absolutely.
But oftentimes you'll read that investments can go up and they can also go down.
Yeah.
So in those instances, kind of, what's the message around compound interest there?
Yeah, that's tricky, because we say, for example, let's say that the returns for the last 50 years have been 8% over time. That's not a guarantee of the future. And it also doesn't mean it will be 8% every year. Sometimes it will be 30%. Sometimes it will be down 40%.
Yeah.
That's the nature of it. But on average, over time, it will be 8%. So the hard part for people to get their head around is that some years I may lose money and some years I'll gain money. And it's about holding a nerve in those years where you lose money. Now, this is assuming you're investing in something sensible. When I quote an 8% average return, that's roughly the global average stock market return. Obviously, if you're investing in things like individual stocks or even riskier assets, let's say like cryptocurrency, for example, there's no guarantee you will get a solid 8% return. So compounding still works, even though it's not an average 8% per year, it is still averaging out over time. So it's a difficult concept, but well worth getting your head around.
I want you to share the dilemma that you spoke about
Sure.
on the Bank of England's Instagram channel. It's about Danica, who's 19 years old.
Yeah, so Danica, she's budgeted all of her money, and after everything, she's got £20 a month left over, and she's not sure whether it's worth investing just £20 a month. Now, she's been told by a friend that it's worth it, that starting early can build the habit, but she's not sure whether she should spend it on herself. She's not sure whether she should, go out and learn new skills with that £20 a month. Is it actually going to grow? And it's an interesting dilemma, because literally half the comments on the post were absolutely do it, and the other half were actually, I think you should do something else. So and there was some in between as well, which we can talk about. But it's a really interesting one, because it's a little bit like we haven't given the audience enough information, really, and that's what they're asking for. Well, has she got her emergency fund sorted? Has she got her goals sorted? And so that's some of the discussion that Danica needs to think about.
And it goes to your point earlier about, there are several steps that need to be in place before you sort of begin to invest. So the four options that Danica sort of like considered, or, was considering sort of going down was building an emergency fund, saving for a deposit, presumably like a house deposit or a flat deposit, investing in herself, and that sort of means more so her skills, so that she's able to grow her income in the long run, or at a young age. And this is something that we come across in some of the dilemmas we discuss in the series. But when you're young, you just think to yourself, well, I'm quite young right now. I'm never going to be 19, 20, 25 again. Let me just enjoy my life. Let me just go traveling. Let me just buy those items from that shop that I've really been sort of eyeing up. So when you consider these different responses or these different options, and then the responses you got from this poll, what do you think Danica should do?
Yeah, let's go through them. Let's go through those options, because some of them have merit. As someone that loves investing, my initial gut reaction is like half the people that said, just do it. I wish I'd started at 19. I started at 35, which is my age, and I wish I'd started earlier. That was my gut reaction too. But a lot of people are saying, actually, does she have an emergency fund? That's the first one. 3 to 6 months of expenses in a bank, safe in case she needs it. So absolutely agreed there. If she doesn't have that, that's where the first £20 should go. The next one I think you mentioned was, is she saving for a house? So we now need to think, what does Danica want to achieve over the next 5 years? I always say that you shouldn't really be considering investing unless you're investing for at least 5, if not 10 years. This comes back to what you said about, waiting years, delayed gratification. It's a really hard thing to get a teenager especially to think about their retirement. I mean, it's so far away. How can you get someone interested in what they will need at 45, 65? But that's what investing is. It's a long-term gain. So if Danica has a goal that's 5 years away, such as saving for a house, she might want to use a lifetime ISA and save that money in cash rather than the stocks version, because investing is very volatile in the short term. So I agree with the people that are saying, if she wants to start saving for a deposit on a house, maybe that's where she should start.
And in the meantime, there are all these other variables out there, currency fluctuations, inflation, mortgage rates, the property market, and all these other considerations. Sometimes you may be able to travel to certain continents and countries, other times you might not. We live in a very uncertain world. Yeah. So this is really actually the kind of the advice and the kind of tip you're giving there is about constancy and keeping an eye on like a long-term goal. And I sort of don't see it as too dissimilar from wanting to achieve a certain fitness goal by a certain month, or after sort of that constant, getting into the gym, when you really don't want to, but you've got to, remain steadfast, or when you just want to achieve any outcome. It could be learning a language, and you might think at the beginning to learn Mandarin it's just impossible. How am I going to understand something like that? But the more you do it, however much you do, it will sort of compound over time, and you'll see your end result. That's really interesting. There were some people that also said to split the difference. Yeah. And my kind of question here is, if Danica is spending, time, she's got £20 at the end of the month, it's going to take her a while to build that 3 to 6 month emergency fund on her salary. And that's time lost, for, building her wealth, investing, gaining that compound interest. What's the solution there?
Yeah, I always say that you can build a small emergency fund, let's say of 1 month. Okay, that's 1 month of expenses, whatever Danica's expenses are. And then you could split the difference after that. So we could say £10 into either short-term savings or spending it on herself, and £10 to her long-term investing. For a teenager, that actually might be something that's a bit more palatable. I get to reward myself after budgeting. I get £10 to spend on whatever I want. It's not a lot, but it's great that she can do that. And then £10 is going towards her future as well. So I actually really like the idea of splitting the difference. You can start investing from £1 on some of these investment provider apps. So I'd say go for it. And the big advantage of that is building the habit. That's what Danica will do. Even if it's only £10 a month, she'll see that coming out of her account consistently. She can set up an automatic contribution for the first of the month, every month, £10 is coming out. She might not even see it if she times it at the same time as when she gets paid, for example. And she'll adjust to that amount coming out, and she'll get used to it. And then what will happen after a year or so, she'll look at her account and she'll see, hopefully, that it's grown a little bit. There's no guarantees, but hopefully it's grown. And that will give her the motivation, the discipline to keep going. So I think splitting the difference, rewarding yourself and investing for the future could be worthwhile.
And what do you say to instances of peer pressure? You have a group of friends, some are saying to you, what's the point of investing more into your pension now, or topping up, as some companies offer, or some jobs offer, or putting £20 away into an ISA or whatever it may be. Come, let's go out, let's celebrate this major birthday, let's go on holiday together. We're not going to be 20 or 25 or whatever it is again. And that kind of constant pressure to kind of go one way or the other. What do you say to that?
That's really interesting and difficult, but the peer pressure actually works both ways. What Danica will find is that she might even end up comparing herself to people that are investing as well, and they'll be putting pressure on her to invest more. And comparison is the thief of joy in that regard. In both regards, you see your friends going out and enjoying themselves on holiday, spending money perhaps they don't have, or you see people that are earning more than you and saving more. It's a really difficult situation to navigate, but all I would say is that the only person you're competing with is yourself. Can you do a little bit better than yesterday? Because you'll never be earning as much as these people, and you don't want to be spending as much as these people on the other side. So it's just, can you do a little bit better every day? But to come back to the point of, my friends are going out, should I join them? That's really difficult, because when you're young, especially when you're early in your career and your workmates are going out, that can be a great time to actually meet new people, network, grow in your career, and potentially earn more money down the road. So there's no right or wrong answer. It's just about sticking to that budget. You know, if you want to spend that £20 going out, make sure it's just that £20 and you're not overstretching yourself, getting yourself into debt. So this is why it's a dilemma. It's really personal.
How do you sort of balance that with, well, look, I've got this goal I want to achieve, but I also really want to just feel like I have friends, or I feel like I want to go out and just treat myself?
That's real. FOMO we're talking about, fear of missing out.
It's FOMO.
Essentially, I think that's what the kids call it.
Thanks for summarising that in like a very easy acronym.
Yeah, and you get FOMO with your friends going out, and you get FOMO in the investing world. You know, I get FOMO all the time. I've chosen my strategy for the next 30 years, I'm committed to it, then there's this shiny new investing thing over here that I want to do. Or maybe I'm committing to this amount every single month, but then my friend wants to go on a stag do abroad, and that's going to eat into my goal. And it's ultimately just deciding what you want most out of life. I do think you can find a balance. You will constantly have your emotions pulling at you in different ways. You should be doing this, you should be spending more time with your friends, you should be going away more, you should be saving for your future, you should have more in your pension. It's emotions are everything in investing. You know, the stock market is completely irrational as well. It's all based on emotion and how people are feeling about their money, about their life. So I can't give you a definitive answer, but all I can say is the better control you have over your emotions and your goals, your vision, and staying steadfast on that, the more likely you are to succeed.
I want to put the dilemma to the side for the moment, because there will be many people watching this that may not be in a privileged position to have disposable income at the end of the month. £20 might even seem quite unachievable for some individuals, and many will be struggling to make ends meet. Knowing that, you know, there are people out there who might have varying levels of disposable income, as well as the, you know, more fortunate or the other scenarios that we've discussed. What are some of the top investing tips? And that includes kind of getting to a place where you might be able to invest, if at all, if you know you want to go down that route. But what are the top investing tips that you would share for the everyday average person?
Well, first of all, I've been there, where I was earning as an intern literally $13,000 a year, could barely make my rent, let alone think about saving or investing. So the first thing I would say that is, if you absolutely cannot afford to invest right now, there's still time. You will grow in your career if you keep working hard. It took me a few years before I could afford to even invest £20 a month. So I totally get it, first of all. For someone that doesn't have a lot of money, my tips would be to start small and don't worry about it. You can literally start with £1 a month. Start in a stocks and shares ISA or on a mock portfolio with fake money. You know, you can start with a mock portfolio and just build from there.
What is the value of starting really small? Because someone might be looking at, well, you know, I can invest £2 a month or a week, or I can't go more than that. Some might look at that and say, well, there might not, you know, this is sort of what Danica was saying. Is there any point?
Yeah.
Am I going to get the return I want? And what's the kind of important aspect of that to you?
Well, I do think that it's still worth it even with small amounts, because you build that habit. You know, you get into this mindset. You can make mistakes, for example. You know, when I first started investing, I put it in something that wasn't quite right for me. Actually, too low risk for what I should have been doing. It was it's not that I lost money. It was just that it wasn't growing at the rate that it should be for someone so young with such a long time horizon ahead of them. So I would say, you know, you can get started and you'll get used to making mistakes, seeing your money go down, and you'll get comfortable with the idea of volatility in investing. So I really think making mistakes early is good with not much money, and building that habit over time, monthly consistent investing, it will build some sort of discipline for you.
As we begin to sort of wrap up this discussion, if you could give one tip, one takeaway, one lesson for our viewers, what would it be?
Well, we talked a lot about compounding returns, so I want the viewers to go away and search for compounding returns and learn about that as much as possible. Use the investing return calculator to see how it works. But another great tip I would say is that there's so many different types of accounts that are available to you. We've talked about the stocks and shares ISA. You can deposit £20,000 per year. All your gains are tax-free. It's an amazing account for starting to invest, but you've also got things like the lifetime ISA that can help stretch your money further. So research that. If you deposit £4,000 a year, the government tops it up by £1,000. You have to use that money either to buy your first home or for retirement, but it's a great account to look into. And you can stretch your money further using something like your workplace pension or a SIP. Mm-hmm. The government tops up contributions to a pension. That's free extra money in theory.
What is a SIP?
A SIP is a self-invested personal pension. Mm-hmm. So it's like a workplace pension, but if you're, for example, working for yourself or you just want more control over your pension, you can use a SIP. Mm-hmm. And as I say, if you put more money into a pension, hopefully your employer is matching that up to an amount, plus the government's topping it up. So you can actually make your money stretch further than you might think. Danica could make that £20 stretch. It's possibly to £30 if she has those government top-ups and the employer is matching over a certain amount. So I would say look into the different types of accounts. It will really help you rather than having to pay tax in a general investment account, for example.
Thank you very much, James. I mean, I learned a lot, and I've been taking notes to sort of take back for myself and to have a think about. But, you know, I think we've learned a lot, and I think one thing I'll probably go back to read about is, you know, compounding interest and how it works.
Definitely.
So I want to thank the viewers for joining us today, and thanks also to James and coming to the bank and for sharing your knowledge and tips. If people want to know more, you can find James online. But where should people?
It's at The Money Stocker on Instagram and at Money Stocker on TikTok, or you can go to the website moneystocker.com.
Wonderful. So thanks very much for joining us on the Bank of England Money Matters series. Please click on the link in the bio on our social media channels and follow us on Instagram and TikTok to hear more information about Money Matters. Thanks very much.